Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Justice. Let's dive in. It didn't happen behind closed doors. There were no quiet words or softly shut doors. When Isabella Cruz was fired, it happened right in front of the entire marketing department at Hamilton and Rowe. The sound of typing halted abruptly. Surprised, then pitying, eyes all turned toward her. "Pack it later," Philip Grant's voice rang out, cold and sharp. "We need your desk cleared by noon. You're a distraction." A few sneering chuckles broke the heavy silence. There were pitying glances, then just silence. Isabella stood frozen, not because she was shocked. She had sensed this moment coming for a long time, but the sheer brutality of it still left her speechless. Everyone knew the failed campaign wasn't her fault. They all knew. But no one said a word. Amid the chaos, Isabella clutched her small handbag tighter, as if holding on to the last fragile remnants of her dignity. Amid the hurried footsteps trying to get away, amid the sidelong, guilty glances, Isabella Cruz stood still, like a small stone trapped in the cold, relentless current of Hamilton and Rowe. That was when Mr. Walter, the old janitor, mostly invisible to everyone, quietly walked past. No fuss, no drawn-out sympathy. He simply paused in front of her, reached into his worn jacket, and pulled out a small object, an old brass key, tarnished under the harsh fluorescent lights. No explanation, no hesitation. He simply placed the key gently into Isabella's trembling hand, his calloused fingers softly closing hers around it. "It's time," he said, his voice deep and brief, before walking away, leaving her standing there, alone with a tiny key and 1,000 unanswered questions. Isabella clutched the unexpected gift tightly in her hand. No one noticed. No one knew. In a world turning its back on her, a hidden door had just cracked open, and though she didn't fully understand it yet, Isabella could feel it deep in her bones. This was not the end. That afternoon, as the last rays of sunlight barely clung to the gray walls of Hamilton and Rowe, Isabella wandered down a deserted hallway, the brass key clutched tightly in her hand. The 15th floor, a place no one spoke of anymore, not since the downsizing. Dust-frosted windows, floorboards creaking under each cautious step. The silence was so thick she could hear her own heartbeat. At the end of the hallway, a weathered wooden door appeared. No nameplate, no markings, only a rusted keyhole and a fragile sliver of hope. Isabella slid the key in. A dry click echoed through the stillness, and the door creaked open. Inside lay a forgotten world. Broken chairs stacked in corners, crumbling boxes of old files, dust hanging in the air like mist. But amidst the ruins, Isabella saw it. A battered whiteboard, streaked with faded ink, still faintly bearing familiar words. Lumina Project, the first ideas, rough sketches, scribbled dreams, and raw passion, all still there as if waiting for her to return. Trembling, Isabella stepped forward. Inside a battered file box, she found it. Her old company tablet, the one she thought had been discarded long ago. She powered it on. Through a cracked screen, audio files flickered to life. Late-night brainstorming sessions, early Lumina concept recordings. Her own voice, young, eager, brimming with hope, echoing in the lifeless air. Isabella hugged the tablet to her chest, her eyes stinging with tears. She hadn't just been fired. She hadn't just been betrayed. She had been robbed, blatantly and coldly. But now she had proof, not to weep over, but to rise with. Standing amid the dust and ruin, Isabella Cruz closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, a tiny, razor-sharp flame sparked to life within her. 6 months. It might not sound long to outsiders, but to Isabella Cruz, it felt like an entire lifetime compressed into half a year. She spent every last penny of her severance pay, maxed out her credit cards, and drained the savings she had spent years building, not to run away, but to start again, from the very pieces they had discarded. In a small rented office on Oak Ridge Street, a modest sign went up, Nova Rise Media. No glitz, no fanfare, only fierce determination, forged into steel through countless sleepless nights. By refining, rebuilding, and breathing new life into the Lumina project, the campaign they had once buried, Isabella transformed it into something she had once only dared to dream about. A campaign filled with real breath, real emotion, untouched by greedy hands. And one by one, the major clients who had fled Hamilton and Row after the humiliating fiasco began turning toward Nova Rise. First one, then two, then three more. Not because Isabella was wealthy, not because she had powerful connections, but because they recognized something rare in her, a genuine belief in the true value of an idea. The day she signed her 5th contract in that tiny, cluttered office, Isabella didn't celebrate with champagne or parties. She simply poured herself a cold cup of coffee, raised it silently, and whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Outside, a light drizzle had begun to fall, just enough to wash the dust from the streets and just enough to signal a new season was coming. A black car glided slowly down the old cobblestone street leading into the city's business district. The once shiny gold-plated sign of Hamilton and Row now looked faded, like a relic from another era. Isabella Cruz stepped out of the car. Her charcoal gray suit hugged her slender, unyielding frame. Her high heels tapped steadily across the marble floor, each click sharp and deliberate in the cavernous, echoing lobby. At first, no one recognized her. They only noticed the aura she carried, calm, commanding, and laced with something irresistible. On the top floor, where weak sunlight barely lit the large boardroom, Philip Grant flipped through thick folders, his face lined with tension. He looked up, startled when he saw her step in. "Isabella." His voice mixed disbelief with lingering arrogance. She smiled, a cold, thin smile, sharp as a blade. "No," she said, her voice soft but cutting. "Miss Cruz," she corrected, "CEO of Nova Rise Ventures and the new owner of Hamilton and Row." The words dropped into the room like a stone plunging into still water, total silence. Philip blinked, laughed awkwardly, until his eyes caught the thick folder in her hand. Bold, unmistakable letters stared back at him. Notice of termination. The laugh died on his lips. His face shifted from confusion to stunned disbelief. It lasted only a moment, but it was a moment Isabella would remember forever. "You can pack up later," she said, echoing the very words he had once used on her. "We need this desk cleared before noon." As 2 security guards entered the room, Philip stood frozen like a statue. There was no more mocking laughter, no more smug pats on the back, only the sharp, decisive sound of Isabella's heels striking the floor as she turned and walked away, leaving behind everything that had once tried to break her. Late afternoon, the 15th floor. The old room remained the same. A thin layer of dust coated the faded boards. The faint whistling of the wind slipped through the blurred glass windows. Isabella stood there, alone. In her hand was the brass key, now more tarnished than before, but still carrying the same cold, heavy weight it had that day. Mr. Walter was mopping the floor, slow and steady as always. The pale fluorescent lights cast a faint glow over his silver hair and worn hands. She raised the key. "I still have it," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes unsurprised. Only a quiet, knowing smile crossed his face. "I knew you would," he said simply. "Told you. You'd understand when the time came." Isabella stepped closer. For the first time through all the rush of rebuilding, she allowed herself to slow down. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "Why did you give it to me that day?" Walter paused. He didn't meet her gaze. Instead, he answered quietly, like a breath in the wind. "Because you were the only one who ever saw me. You said good morning. You asked how I was. You gave me a name instead of calling me Janitor." Silence. "You might fall," he continued, "but someone like you don't stay down for long." Isabella stood there still. No grand speeches, no loud declarations of gratitude, She simply stepped forward and hugged him, like a granddaughter embracing the quiet witness who had believed in her when no one else did. "I haven't forgotten," she whispered. Walter nodded, still not looking up. "That's all that matters," he said. Night fell slowly over the city, streetlights casting long, broken shadows across the sidewalks. Another day was ending, but for Isabella Cruz, everything was just beginning. In the top-floor office of Nova Rise Ventures, she stood quietly by the wide glass window, looking out. Buildings shimmered in the distance, the roads below glowing like tiny golden rivers, a silent reminder of a journey paved with hardship. No one had handed her a crown, no one had rolled out a red carpet. Isabella had walked through cold nights, through long, grueling days spent alone in that dusty old room with a stained whiteboard. She hadn't just stood back up, she had burned down the rotten old forest. The prejudices, the injustices, the sneers, and from those ashes she had built a kingdom of her own, not out of hatred, not for revenge, but to prove one simple truth. When you're buried, sometimes you're not being destroyed. You're being planted. Outside, the city buzzed with new stories, new races. Isabella smiled faintly. She no longer needed validation. She no longer needed applause. Within her, the name Isabella Cruz was already bright enough, strong enough, and peaceful enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget, like to spread a little kindness, subscribe to hear more heartfelt stories, and stick around for the next video. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next story.